I would really love this whole presentation, this whole talk, this whole event to be interactive. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and ask.
Why did you leave if it's not too personal?
So the question was, why did I leave? This is, as always, with decisions so dramatic, it's always a combination of multiple different factors. Some of them are not very relevant, so I'm going to skip them. The ones which are, for the last 2 years, I was a chief technology officer of Simbrella. And before that, I was implementation director covering the R&D, the product R&D and platform R&D. And before that, I was a solution architect, the guy who came up with how we actually build our product. And during that 2 years, operating at the C-level was exciting. Even as a side gig, I came here to ADA University, and I did an executive MBA. And why did I do that? Because I wanted to talk the language of the C-level. When I suddenly have become a chief technology officer, it means that I found myself frequently in the meetings with CFO, CMO, CEO, obviously. And they were talking things that I wasn't very familiar with. So I came here and did an MBA, and it helped me. It still doesn't answer your question, so I'm digressing. Why I left is one big reason that would be interesting in this context is as I was diving into the executive role, my day-to-day and the body of my work and contribution has grown less technical and more organizational, and I would even say political. And I realized that this is actually interesting and valuable, maybe, I'm not sure. But what I was sure in is that this was not the best use of my time as an engineer. Because I felt like an engineer still, even though, yes, I'm an executive, I have a team of 20 remarkable people, they are doing some absolutely fantastic things. But I want to get my hands dirty, and I see that the company is not really going in the direction that I would find fascinating for me personally, right? This was one. The other one, which is a great segue into the next stage, is around that time, 2015, so second year of my CTO-ship, I started looking into AI and machine learning. And I watched this great course by Sebastian Thrun and Peter Novik on Udacity and some machine learning course on Udacity, and I started reading some books. And I realized that this is really interesting. This is really something that I never did before, and I'm really interested in it. I mean, mind you, it was 2015, 11 years ago. So there was no ChatGPT, there was no Gen AI. It was barely neural nets because GPUs just came back a couple of years ago, or not came back, like neural nets came back, GPUs came out. But it was still so interesting, right? And I even, not just me and some colleagues in Simbrella back then, we even tried some toy projects with AI, using some logistic regression for some simple eligibility prediction, right? Because SimCredit was about looking at a user who makes a request to get an advance and analyzing a body of data available about that user and making an informed decision. Do we lend them money or not? Because if we lend them money and they don't return it, we return it. So Simbrella's business model was mostly about covering churn, covering this bad debt. We really needed intelligent decisions, right? And then the AI started being a thing. So we started making some toy projects, toy experiments with that. A bit dark and sad part of the answer is that I didn't feel like the future of Simbrella is aligned with mine. It's not necessarily dark, it's just a bit boring. But really exciting part of the answer is that I felt that I want to do AI, right? I want to really dive into it. I want to really learn about it. I want to do some cool projects with it. And that was the next chapter that I'm going to talk about.
You mentioned that at peak, Cinderella users, Cinderella have more than 240 million users. I have two questions about that. Which countries are these? And second question is, how did you manage to control these apps and database and give updates to at least security updates? You as a Cinderella team, you need to. How did you manage to control this?
The countries, I think it's on the website, so you can check there. From my account, it's mostly CIS countries, former Soviet Union countries, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. African countries, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Uganda, Cote d'Ivoire, and more that I don't remember. I've been to Tanzania. That's, the African country that I've been to because of this business. Eastern European countries and Middle Eastern, Southeast Asian countries. I don't remember exactly where we operated, but you can check it on the website. So 25 in total. How we managed to control it? Great question. Because if you are not mindful about this question before the scale comes and washes you away, then scale comes and washes you away. What we were lucky to realize at the second or third operator, at the very, if Simbrella was founded in 2008, this is 9, beginning of 10. So in a year after the beginning of operation, what we realized that if we don't standardize the product, the tiers of the architecture, the code, the customizability, the GUI, the interfaces, the business model, the contracts, the patents, everything. If we don't take a standardized approach, then we're not going to make it. Then every next operator, every next operation, every next account is going to cost us as much operational overhead as the previous one. And then this just dies at some point. Because if you just get 20 more employees for each new account, then very quickly you run into this problem that you cannot really communicate information, efficiently between them. So what we did pretty early on, we took this stance, right? I'm not saying we decided and we did it next day. It took a couple of years. Concrete answer is that we had this SimCredit written basically from scratch, simply as a piece of code and stuff like that. And we called this, okay, this is SimCredit 1.0. We are going to make SimCredit 2.0, which is going to become like a Swiss Army knife. And this is mostly tech students, right? So am I allowed to go into depth of tech? Okay, good. The idea there was to establish 3 layers of the product design. We had this, what we call Simbrella framework, which was just the components, very reusable. For example, adapter for one protocol, like HTTP-based billing. Adapter for getting and sending SMS messages, because it was still SMS back then. Getting voice calls, doing some charging and so on, right? And then on top of that, we had the next level, which was core product, which is SimCredit, the product, the core, the very standard, very reusable part of the business logic, which will be more or less the same everywhere. And then the third tier was specific to each account, where we made it, okay, this is for Azercell in Azerbaijan. We will take the same framework, the same core, and we will add 5% worth of code, which is adaptations, and we will plug it with very well-defined plugin architecture, right? So this is standardization from technical point of view. Lawyers did that with law, with contracts. Marketing team did that with pricing and formulating scoring conditions and bad debt management and stuff like that, and offers to the clients. Operations people did that with providing some standardized operating interface. At some point, we created what was called Archive, as we called it, which is a centralized solution where the data from all the operators is flowing on a daily basis, and it's a single big OLAP, online analysis processing database, where the same analytics is done on everything, right? Because it's the same, well, now I would say it's data warehouse or lakehouse or whatever. Back then, there were no these terms, so we use the term archive, right? Answering your question, or summarizing the answer, standardization was the key. But as Philip Kotler, the guru of marketing, famously said, think global, act local, right? You cannot just be global and say, this is my solution, either you take it or leave it, because everybody will live it, and that's it, right? You should be smart. You should say, I can do whatever you want. But at the back of your mind, you should think, I have everything standardized, and I have a very well-defined points of extension from where we can extend it to one particular kind of operator or the next.
You mentioned the Unix philosophy, saying that it is focusing on one thing, which will be the main thing moving you towards the future or a greater career or whatever. The Unix philosophy, is it? And
yes, you have to do one thing and do it.
Yes, one thing and do it. And you also said that at the Meta, some of your stabilized also section.
Yes.
But do you think that agrees with the current job market, considering that with the new applications, the lower levels of employee who expect more from you rather than having some specification on a specific thing. I agree that it is still a mentionable thing in big corporations because you are just distributing the law, you are saying you will do this, you will do this specific thing, but in the lower places, I think, due to the recent change, it doesn't matter. What do you think about it?
As I said, there are many competing philosophies, right? For example, there is this philosophy of diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is very different from do one thing and do it well, right? It's complete opposite of it. And I don't want to say one is better than the other. What I've seen, though, because I can talk about what I've seen, is that people who tend to focus on things that they love, they achieve. And they go through hardships and hard times, and they become very good and very sought after specialists on that thing. Whereas if one is a jack of all trades, it's really hard to position yourself in a way that will stand out. For example, you're going for an internship in a big tech company, right? Very real problem for many American and European, mostly American undergrad students, or even grad students. There are literally thousands of applications, maybe tens of thousands of applications coming the way of every big tech company in every internship season. What are they looking for? That you can code, that you can do Java and Python, that you can do SQL? No, because it's clear that you should. They are looking for something unique, for something that would stand out, for something that, for example, you wrote some small ChatGPT from scratch. Wow. How could you do that? By being generalist or specialist? I would argue that this takes some commitment and this takes some focus. I'm just sharing some data points with you. And then I think it's up to you to kind of reconcile. I know that's the hardest part, right? And I'm smart moving that responsibility to you, but eventually it's up to every one of us to take our environment and do the best we can in that environment, right? It is just that doing this thing, doing one thing and doing it well, it gives you focus. It gives you time to actually figure it out. Because otherwise, there is this joke, right? Some people call them full stack engineers. What is full stack engineering? Does it even exist? I would argue that it doesn't. There is front end, there is back end. Even front end and back end have multiple different facets. And saying I'm a master of both, well, I don't know. I would be a bit dubious, right? If I would be a hiring manager or recruiter or something like that. Lastly, to answer your question, when you go to a company like Meta or Google, there are many, many teams. Every team is specializing on something relatively small. And the team is 10 people with some junior engineers, senior engineers, and so on, right? So you get into a team and then you start diving really deep because the company is expecting you to actually deliver an excellent job on this particular component or framework or product or pipeline that your team is responsible in and along the spectrum of your particular responsibilities. And of course, as a junior engineer, you would mostly get told what to do. As it's called here in Azerbaijan, mid-level engineer or simply software engineer in the West, you get some independence, right? You're not as handheld as IC3, as a junior in Meta or Google. But as a senior, as IC5, actually it's expected that you do everything end to end. And as IC6, and I've been IC6 at Meta, you are expected to tell others what to do. You are expected to create the ideas. And doing it at, a full stack, diverse, jack of all trade level, well, it just doesn't cut it. You cannot get to the depth that your serious tech employer is expecting of you. Does this answer your question? Okay, cool, thank you.
So you said that you've been in the team and you mostly spend your time in the research lab in Volkswagen. My main question was, what do you think, for someone who is not interested in research lab, for example, who doesn't want to go that way, does it really matter to study in the top, let's say, top 10, top 20 university, or is there any difference between, let's say, top 14 and top 100 university, let's say in the same country, if you don't go into the research field? Like even, for example, you are a hiring manager in Meta, yes? Would you, if you have two, let's say, candidates, would you look into that part, like which university they've been, or you would think differently?
I haven't been a hiring manager, but I have been on hiring like committees and interviewing people and so on, right? And making decisions together. More often than not, hiring managers are actually paying a lot of attention to that. So if the candidate is from MIT or Stanford or Cornell or Caltech, CMU, whatever, this is another data point. It's not everything, but it certainly has its weight. You should understand that if you're in a top university, this top university will have top connections with industry. So if you are in, for example, Stanford, arguably you have an easier time of getting an internship in Google or Meta or whatever, right? And if you get an internship and do a remarkable job, you get a return offer from company, from industry, not from academia. There can be multiple door opening aspects of being in a top university too. It's not just getting top education. TU Munich in the world, right? Yes, it's a top school, it's like number 14, and it provides excellent education. But is it well connected with companies like Google and Meta and whatever? I wouldn't say so. ETH, for example, is better in that sense, right? Because there is Google office in Zurich next door, which is very big. There is Meta office in Zurich and so on, right? Whereas in Munich, you could go to SAP and BMW and things like that, but then again, you would need some effort. Those recruiters probably wouldn't come and hunt you in the school itself, which the big tech companies in the US do with big universities in the US. Does it answer your question?
I'm sorry.
You said it definitely has a weight if you're from top university. How much?
How much weight? Well, to define how much weight, we should define a unit of measurement, right? And it's very hard. I think it was more of a figure of speech. When I said it has a weight, I wanted to say that it's not negligible. Let me just kind of summarize the experiences that I had, right? Or the recruiters or hiring managers that I've seen in Meta. If your research is really aligned with what the team does, this is more important than your school. So you could do that research and you could publish a paper being in a top 100, like in number 85 school, which is okay. It would be better than if you do something irrelevant to this team in a top school, right? So being specific is always more important than being generic. That would be my answer. Does it make sense?
So if both research are irrelevant, then the guy with top school. If both research of the candidates are irrelevant to the team works, then in this case, one has the top school.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit oversimplified. It sounds like a football competition, you know? If you scored the same number of goals, you look at who did it at home and who did it in the guest field. But more or less, yeah, it is kind of one of the data points. But every situation is different. So it's hard to kind of have one size fits all recipe here, right? The active opportunities that you have when studying in top school are more important than just passive opportunities that you're getting. So the halo of top school that will work for you by some account manager saying, oh, this guy's from MIT or whatever, I would say in modern realities, it's less important than you utilizing connections of MIT and some tech, right? And going to the events, showing off your projects, connecting with recruiters, doing some active work. You simply have more of that opportunity on top schools. That's what I'm saying. Does it make sense?
Yeah, so like the hiring criteria are very complex, and because of that, the guys who hires are, I would say, they cannot measure it fully, so...
It's also multi-tiered. When we were searching for an intern, it is not like we were searching for a person from the street or from university. Previously, recruiters would do a standardized procedure and collect a promising pool of interns. And then they would share that pool, the CVs of those people who already passed the first stage, with the specific hiring managers. So there is still kind of the merit of passing through the first stage, and this is relatively generic. You do some coding interview, you do some behavioral and stuff like that, and there are tons of good resources to prepare in a generic way for those.
Do you think that your life would be different if you really got accepted to a top US university? And my second part of the question, how did you come up with the solution, like with this mind that I will drop everything with family, with kids, and go to the US or something? How to take this risk while having a family with 3 kids?
Yeah, okay, let's do the first question. It's relatively easy. Yes, it would be very different and kind of, it's just that, right? It would be a different country. Instead of having free, basically, tuition at TU, I would have to pay around $100,000 per year, and I'd probably have a student loan, and maybe I would get to big tech earlier, maybe later. Many things could have been different, yes. So let's do the second part. The second part is, how did I decide, right? a part of this was some romantic motivation in me. You know, I was watching this course by Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thrun, right? I don't know if it still exists. Do you guys study AI here in ADA? Is there an AI course? Do you do Russell Norvig textbook and Artificial Intelligence, the Modern Approach? That is classical AI textbook, right? It's written by Stuart Russell, the 40, 50 years professor from UC Berkeley, and Peter Norvig, who has been head of Google Research for a long time. Now he's some director, right? It is a great book, and the course was built around this book. And incidentally, my AI course in TU Munich, just AI, not machine learning. Machine learning is just one piece of AI. It was also built around that book, so it kind of gave me some head start on that. And I was watching it, and I was listening to how Peter Norvig was explaining things. And I had a romantic thought of, I want to talk to this guy. I want to go and get to know him, you know? I want Peter Norvig to know me too. I want to have a conversation with him. And this was one driver, right, among many that I had, that I want to get to that environment. I want to learn AI from people that I admire. I want to actually discuss some cool stuff with them. I didn't leave my family here behind, so we moved together. Me and my wife, we also were thinking about that it's time for us to kind of go and explore some new cultures, new lands, for the kids to grow up there and have this diverse kind of world outlook and stuff like that, right? Probably speak different languages. I got a lot of support from my family, so this was also a helpful thing, right? But I think the main driver was to actually engage with this world, fascinating world of AI, right, back then. Now I understand much more about it. And honestly, it doesn't sound as fascinating as it was back then, when it was like this shiny halo for me, right? But back then it was shiny halo, and it has a very strong gravity, strong pull.
Okay, first question is, nowadays, at least in Azerbaijan, most students, after they finish bachelor's, they go to master's like immediately, the same year. Do you think that is a good thing or that is a bad thing? Also, the second question is, I heard about things like, you should not be too loyal to one company, like work at 10 years. You should like work at 2 years maximum and switch to other ones. What do you think about that?
The first one was about, does it make sense to go and do masters immediately, right? This is a complicated question, but let's answer it from an industry perspective. Like if you want to go to industry, right, not to academia. And that would make it slightly easier to answer. I will talk from my experience of doing an MBA here. When I was doing an MBA in ADA like from 2013 to 15, we did it with Maastricht School of Management, right? There was this very good and reputable Dutch educational institution that kind of was driving 80%, if not 90%, of the curriculum, of what should be of the quality standards and so on. And that was very good because for ADA, it was the first experience of doing executive MBA, even any MBA. What I noticed in the class is that people who had experience, they had a much more efficient acceptance and application of the material that was taught, right? Again, very personally, at the point where I started studying, I was already working for 11 years and 6 of them as a manager. And it was A, very rewarding, B, very sticky to sit in the class, hear some concept. Oh, you know, there is bullwhip effect. You go to supply chain management course and they're talking about bullwhip effect, right? As every next stage in the supply chain, the level of uncertainty grows. I'm not a supply chain guy, it's just a stupid example. But if I were a supply chain guy, I would say, oh, wow, this is why this happened at that point with that supply chain that I was working on. I didn't understand that, but now I do. This is very, very good. This is like a catalyst, you know? This is catalyst of educational reaction. You're sitting in a class and you immediately understand, it clicks and it sticks. And if you don't have this, it's just a bunch of theory to you. And you just write the notes, you go to exam, you pass the exam, you go to the next class, in time you forget what you learned. What I've seen is that, again, statistically, right, with pretty small sample size, but still like 20, 25 people in the class, people who had more experience, they were more engaged, they were more interested, and they learned more. And they were in position to apply that more than people, they were people who came without any experience as a manager, right? Although we had a requirement that there should be at least 1 year or 2 years of management experience. Those folks actually had a hard time or had a boring time because they were sitting there, they were paying for the tuition, but they were not actually getting a lot from it. So I would recommend actually to take some time to do some real work, right? To go to industry, to actually do a few years of working on something. In the US, this is made pretty efficient. If you are doing it right, by the time you end your undergrad, you'll do 2 or 3 internships. And you will work in 3 different companies. And if you're lucky and super talented, those companies will be Google and Meta and, I don't know, Apple or Amazon or Microsoft. And then, you know what they do? In the last year, they choose their internship in a way that the company that they go and become intern with is the company where they want to work. So they go and they work like crazy. They deliver excellent results. They get, in Meta, it's called redefines expectations. And that automatically means you get a return offer. And without any interview, you have a job, full-time, which is very, very hard to do just the normal way through the front door, right? So, yes, it does matter.
What if there will be a lot of garbage feedback?
Okay, good question. So, in good systems, the garbage feedback doesn't make it through. You typically get a feedback from a person who is a good feedback giver and who is positioned well to give a feedback. A good feedback giver means they have a good track record of people saying, this person's feedback helped me. Good positioning means they are expert in their field, or they are a tech lead of high scope, or they have earned their right to give feedback, right? It's a merit-based culture. It's not a random feedback. Does it make sense? Good.
Yeah, I think it's not about like person does not have one single thing that he's passionate about in his life and he just need to find it. Like it depends on your life period. Like for example, right now you want like to explore something. And like when you explore it, you get like a little bit bored or like satisfy your interest in it, and you find out other area and you're like passionate about it. And like you just switch out and go to there. Like it's not about one thing that you were born with. It's just like your exploration of the world.
It's very true, of course. It's not like one thing that you do throughout your life. I mean, if you're like a clock master from Zurich, maybe you can do clocks for your entire life, right? But if you're working in tech, the tech is changing so quickly that what you're passionate about today is maybe not relevant tomorrow, let alone, as you said, you can just get bored with it, right? I have examples of very successful engineers. One of my mentors, for example, she was IC7 at the time in Meta, and she left for XAI. At some point, she said, okay, I'm done with ML compilers. I did enough compilers. Now I want to do kernels. Now I want to do GPU work. I want to dive into that. That is the next summit I want to conquer, right? So for her, that was motivation. But at any given time, doing many things and not knowing which you're actually interested in has a lot of overhead. And this overhead is hard to manage. That is what I'm saying. You were asking questions about loyalty, right? Which I forgot to answer. So I would say it's not about changing company every 2 years. It's more about changing what you do. So companies like Meta, for example, they are very open. They are actually built the way to motivate employees to change teams. Don't sit in one team for a long time. A, that is what keeps them motivated and interested because they lose interest otherwise. B, that is what keeps them growing because when you know multiple things very well, you can relate and you get this exponential effect from it, right? So consider a big tech job.
If you go and ask for a raise of salary, and like if it's resistant for it, or you're like increasing the raise, because like it's not egoistical to like want a good like conditions for your life. And like the company in which you work does not provide it, and like other positions you go and apply and provide you, there's not some bad decision.
Again, this is my personal opinion, but I would say sticking to a good environment and good mentorship and good even team or maybe org, multiple teams in the same organization, is beneficial and giving you those exponential or synergetic effects in your career building. And why is it the case? I had a mentor, again in Meta, who said something that stuck with me, right? She said, sometimes it takes 20 years to come to a position where you are ready to do that big thing that you want to do. And then you do it in 20 years. Maybe it's a bit exaggerated, maybe it's not. When you switch companies every 3 years, there is a high overhead and high risk of burnout, even when one is young. One needs to figure that out, right, somehow. We can take this offline. I see you're very passionate about it, but then we're also running out of time.